Think back to February. Do you remember the news headlines of that time? There was a terrible rumor going around that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine. There was all this indication that there was escalation happening. But when Vladimir Putin had a news conference, he said, "What is everyone talking about? I would never do that." Do you remember that? And then? So what was he doing? What was that all about? Jesus tells us today he was calculating. He was calculating. Jesus says, what king before a battle doesn't sit down and look at the troops that he's got and decide, is this a good time? Do I have what it takes to win this? He says, what self-respecting builder doesn't do a budget before starting the project? Who digs a hole and then realizes, oh, wait a minute, I don't have what it takes to finish this? He said, what couch potato who's on his 900th day of binging Netflix says, you know, tomorrow I think I'll go to Paris Island and become a Marine? Doesn't work like that. Jesus says the same is true for following me. If you want to follow me, you need to figure, do I have the commitment it takes? One way to understand what Jesus is saying in the gospel today is that he only accepts blank checks from us. He only wants a blank check that you have signed handed over to him. If you give him a check with the amount written in, he won't take it. He doesn't want a check with an amount written in. He wants to write it in. And he doesn't want a gift card. He only wants blank checks. And then he says, holding the check that you've given him up, is this going to bounce? Is this check going to clear? Because I'm asking. I'm planning to cash this check. That is what we are looking at today. One of the things we've seen is when something really counts, we may not know how we're going to do something, but we can know for sure we will find a way. When it really matters, we find a way. Back in February, the night before Russia invaded Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky got on TV and he spoke to the Russian people in Russian, and he begged them not to go forward with their plan. Interestingly, he wasn't able to decide whether this was a good time for a war or not. While the invading king can calculate, the one being invaded doesn't get to decide. He didn't have the luxury of saying, am I in a good position to win this war? And that's true in our lives as well. It is never a good time for a catastrophe. But we are not promised to be protected from catastrophes. We can't always calculate, is this a good time? But we can make a decision to trust and to persevere. Just like it's never a good time to have your country invaded, it is never a good time to get cancer. One of our parishioners found out this week that her adult daughter has pancreatic cancer. She prayed that it would be benign, but it wasn't. It's never a good time for that. No one says, would this be a good year for me to lose my job? Maybe this is a good year for that. Maybe this is a good year for my child to be in crisis. Maybe this is a good year for that life-changing car accident, or for my house to burn down. It's never a good time. And We have to know that we can get through anything if we stay close to God. If we give God our blank check, we do not get a promise that we will be shielded from catastrophes. We get a promise that we'll never be alone in them. And so we can say, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know what the future holds. But I know who holds the future. Jesus is strong today. He says, if you're going to lose your faith the next time something bad happens, don't follow me, because I'm telling you it is. I'm telling you it is, he says. Something bad's going to happen. It's called the cross. Something bad's going to happen. I'm not promising that that won't happen. But you can stay close to me, and then you will always have enough funds in your account. Sometimes we need role models to help us with this. And maybe that person that you prayed for at the beginning of Mass, the one who you most credit with handing on the gift of faith to you, maybe they are a role model in this. One of them for me is someone named Fred Shuttlesworth. He's a lesser known figure in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. He was a pastor in Birmingham, Alabama, and he wasn't one of the famous ones, but he was a lot of the brains behind the movement. He was the one who told Martin Luther King, during their acts of civil disobedience, he said, we have to have the young people do the big jail time. He said, we can't have providers and people, we can't have mothers away from their children for months. It's okay for the mothers and the fathers to do a night or two. But the real long jail terms, we've got to get our young people to do that. And it worked. That strategy worked. And the KKK hated him for that. One night, while his family was sleeping, they blew up his house. And amazingly, miraculously, everyone survived. He was in the yard, shaken, and a cop came up to him, who it later was revealed was himself in the Klan. And he said to Shuttlesworth, I'll clean this up. Buddy, if I were you, I'd get my rear end out of this town. And Shuttlesworth said, God didn't save me from this so I could run away. God didn't save my life for me to run. I'm going to stay right here. The torment didn't stop. Of course it wouldn't. They continued to harass him. Several times they beat him, once with chains. They blew up his church that he was a minister of. And people would ask him, how do you stay? How do you have the courage to do it? And he said, the night that they blew up my house and I survived, God was showing me that they can't kill me. He said, someday they may succeed in killing my body, but they can never kill my spirit. They can never kill my faith. They can never kill this movement. They're going to live on. So today we're being asked a really challenging question. Is your faith, is my faith, a blank check given to God? One thing I'd like to say is, if your answer to that is not yet yes, don't stop coming. Don't get discouraged if you're not there yet, because this is a very high level of discipleship. And he's been preparing us for this. Do you remember a few weeks ago he said, strive to enter the narrow gate? This is the narrow gate. This is what he's talking about. And maybe you're saying to yourself, listen, I'm here. I like coming to church, but I'm not ready for this. And Jesus always had room for people to come and be with him who weren't necessarily ready to be part of his inner circle. He always attracted crowds. So maybe you're not ready to be a full disciple yet. But looks like you're ready to sign up for his emails. You're ready to be a subscriber. You're not all the way in, maybe. But the question for all of us is, what would it look like to be a little more in than I have been? What would it look like to make a little bigger commitment, to be a little braver in my commitment? And if you're not able to move a step today, you can at least be proud that you asked yourself the question, that you didn't run out of this church. The fact that you're not running out of this church proves that you're on the journey. You wouldn't be here if you weren't somewhere on the journey. I once saw one of those churches with a signboard in front that changes every week, and I think it said it so well. It explains what it means to be on the road to giving God a blank check but not being quite ready yet. It said, God doesn't need your ability, just your availability.